Let me ask you something that most people are too afraid to say out loud. What if your biggest fear isn't failure, but becoming the version of yourself you secretly dream about? What if English is not the problem, but the mirror? What if you're not bad at languages? You're just tired of pretending you're not afraid. This is not a story about passing exams. It's not about getting everything right. It's about a teacher who failed English. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. He was laughed at, ignored, even told he wasn't good enough to teach, and yet he became the most respected mentor in the school. This video will show you how that happened, step by step, and why his failures didn't break him, they rebuilt him. And along the way you'll discover something else, how to turn your own fears, doubts, and broken confidence into fuel, not just for learning English, but for transforming your identity. You'll learn how failure rewires your brain, how shame can become your power, and how speaking one imperfect sentence could shift the direction of your life. So if you've ever failed, if you've ever frozen in a conversation, if you've ever avoided your dreams because your English wasn't ready, this story is your mirror. Stay until the end, because what you'll learn isn't just about language. It's about finally becoming the person you were always meant to be. He remembered the silence in the exam room, not the clock ticking, not the pencils moving, just the silence that grew heavier when he saw the red mark. Fail. Again. 3rd time. Everyone else moved on. He stayed behind. His classmates didn't laugh, but somehow that made it worse. They pitied him. That night, he couldn't look in the mirror, not because he failed English, but because he believed that failure was his name now. He had always feared English, but not for the reason people think. It wasn't the grammar, the long texts, or even the vocabulary. It was the fear of sounding stupid, of opening his mouth and hearing his own insecurity echo back. It was fear of the look people give when they don't understand your words, and worse, when they do, and judge them anyway. So instead of speaking up, he shrank, inside, every time. He started avoiding conversations. He skipped gatherings. When someone asked, "How was the exam?" he'd fake a smile and say, "It was okay," even though it wasn't. He started avoiding people, but mostly he avoided himself, because deep down he was haunted by one question. Am I the failure? Not, did I fail? But am I the failure itself? That question burned quietly for days. Then something shifted. Not dramatically, not with music playing in the background, but with a single thought. While walking home one day, he whispered something, almost by accident. Failure is information, not identity. He stopped in his tracks. That sentence, it didn't just sound good, it felt true. He had been living like failure meant he was broken, but what if it just meant something needed to change? So he did something strange that night. He looked in the mirror and said one sentence in English, just one, imperfectly. His voice cracked. His grammar was messy, but he said it, out loud. Not to impress, but to confront the silence inside him. The moment was small, but for the first time, it was his. He didn't speak English that day to be correct. He spoke to be free. And here's the funny part, that one imperfect sentence, it felt more powerful than any exam grade, because it wasn't about English anymore. It was about reclaiming his voice in life. He decided then, every day he would read aloud for just 3 minutes, not because it would fix everything, but because it was the opposite of hiding. It was showing up in sound, with honesty. He still failed again later. But it didn't cut as deep. Why? Because this time he understood something most learners don't. The real danger isn't failing English. It's letting English become the reason you doubt your worth. That shift from shame to curiosity changed everything. Instead of thinking, "I can't," he started asking, "What can I learn here?" And that's how it started. A new voice. A quiet rebellion against the identity he had carried for too long. He didn't tell anyone about it. But every night he read a little more, spoke a little clearer, and started writing short notes in English about how he felt. He was still scared. But now, Fear wasn't the driver. He was. If you want to fail again and again, here's the exact recipe. Start studying English with a lump in your throat and fear in your stomach. Let panic be your teacher. Let every mistake feel like proof that you're not enough. If you want zero progress, just keep waiting for the perfect moment. You know, the day when you suddenly feel ready. It won't come, but keep waiting anyway. That's how you stay stuck. Want to keep sounding the same 5 years from now? Easy. Just avoid speaking English unless you're 100% sure your sentence is perfect. Don't risk embarrassment. Don't open your mouth. Instead, stay in your head, where everything is safe, silent, and invisible. That's the secret to making sure no one ever sees your potential, including you. If you want to stay exactly where you are, punish yourself for every mistake. Turn every small error into a character flaw. Say things like, "I'm so stupid. Why can't I get this? I'll never be fluent." Feed that shame like it's your pet. Let it grow. Let it sit beside you while you try to study. Eventually it'll become your identity, and your fluency will remain a dream, not a skill. Do you want to keep your English hidden forever? Just hide your weaknesses. Be too proud to ask questions. Pretend you understand everything. Numb your confusion by smiling and nodding, even when your brain is screaming for clarity. Stay in that quiet panic. Let it become your new normal. That way, no one will ever know your real level, including you. But here's the twist. These are the exact habits that feel safe, and yet they're the ones quietly destroying your progress. Most people don't fail because they're lazy. They fail because they've been tricked into following these patterns. They mistake protection for progress, silence for strength, shame for discipline, and they don't even realize it. So let's try something else. Today, before you study, sit still, breathe, let calmness wash over you. Now begin. Not because you're perfectly prepared, but because you're present. This alone changes how your brain stores information. Want proof? Try reading one English page after deep breathing and compare your focus. The difference is real. Next, instead of avoiding speaking, try saying one honest sentence right now. It doesn't have to be beautiful, just real. For example, "I'm scared to speak English, but I want to learn." That sentence? That's a breakthrough. Fluency doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with truth. Say it out loud. Feel the power of being honest in a second language. That's real learning. And finally, today, ask for help in one small area. Maybe it's a grammar point. Maybe it's pronunciation. Maybe it's how to use have been without sounding confused. Whatever it is, say, "Can you help me with this?" In English, if you can. Because asking isn't weakness. It's the doorway out of failure. And most people never open it. He walked into the classroom like a man carrying invisible weight. Students barely looked at him. Some whispered, "That's the guy who failed English 3 times. Their eyes didn't say teacher. They said imposter. He felt it but didn't respond. He just placed his books on the desk and greeted the room in a quiet voice. No one answered, but he stayed every day, quiet, watching, waiting. They didn't trust him. Yet, what they didn't see was what happened after they left. When the halls were empty and the sun started to set, he stayed. He grabbed a broom, cleaned the floor, and played English audio stories in the background. While sweeping, he listened. Then he shadowed, line by line. "I don't know what you mean." Pause. Repeat. "I don't know what you mean." His broom became a microphone, his empty classroom, a silent mentor. The progress was slow, painfully slow, but he didn't stop. He didn't tell anyone either. He just built his English fluency in the shadows. He reread one page from his graded reader each night. Same page, over and over, until every word lived in his mouth, not just on paper. While others chased shortcuts, he walked barefoot through repetition, not because it was fun, but because it worked. No one applauded, no one noticed, but something shifted. One day a student asked, "Sir, how do you say this in English?" It wasn't a big moment, but it broke something. The wall, the doubt, the silence. He didn't answer like an expert. He answered like someone who had suffered, and that's why they listened. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. Slowly, students began coming to him, not for grammar rules, but for courage, for understanding, for the feeling of not being judged. They knew he had struggled, and that made his success believable. He wasn't a hero on a pedestal, he was one of them, just further down the path. The trust didn't come from his title, it came from his scars. One day, he stood in front of the board and told them a story, his story. He said, "I failed English 3 times, and those failures taught me how to listen better, how to learn deeper, how to help you." The room was silent, not because they didn't care, but because they did. For the first time, they saw a mentor in the man they once doubted. He gave them an assignment that day. Tell one honest story in English, not a perfect story, a true one. And they did, with broken grammar, shy smiles and nervous pauses. But they spoke, because he gave them what most teachers don't, permission to be human, to be imperfect, to be in process. And suddenly, learning didn't feel like performance. It felt like healing. And that's how he became the most respected mentor in the school, not because he spoke like a native, but because he turned his pain into a path others could follow. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of what English would teach him, and what he could teach through it. Imagine this, you're in front of your computer, ready to speak English. You know the words, you practiced, but suddenly, nothing. Your mind goes blank. Your chest tightens. You forget how to say the simplest sentence. Is it because you're lazy? No. Is it because you're stupid? Absolutely not. It's because your nervous system just hit survival mode. And when that happens, your brain doesn't care about fluency. It cares about protection. When your body senses a threat, even a social one, like speaking English in public, it floods your system with cortisol, the stress hormone. Blood rushes away from your language center. Your logical thinking dims. Your emotional brain takes over. This is called a fear cortisol shutdown. Your English didn't disappear. Your access to it did. Like trying to find a book in a library during an earthquake. You don't need better grammar. You need a calmer system. Here's the loop most learners don't see. One failure triggers shame. Shame predicts more failure. Your nervous system locks up again. Over time, your brain isn't reacting to English. It's reacting to what English means to your identity. You don't fear verbs. You fear judgment, rejection, looking foolish. And that fear keeps repeating because no one teaches you how to break the loop. But you can. Let's start now. Before your next study session, stop. Take a deep breath, in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold for 2, out through your mouth for 6. Do this for 20 seconds, that's all. Why? Because it tells your body, I'm safe. And when your body feels safe, your brain reopens. English flows again. It's not magic. It's biology. Now here's a twist most people miss. Your brain remembers shame more vividly than success. You remember the moment you froze, the laughter, the embarrassment. But do you remember the compliment you got last month? Probably not. That's called a negativity bias, and it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to work with it. Write down one success in English, just one, even if it's small. Say it out loud. Let your body feel what success sounds like. You're not broken. Your learning system is just overloaded. When you turn failure into data, everything changes. Instead of saying, I messed up, say, interesting, my mind shut down when she asked me a question. That's not shame. That's science. Now your brain says, this is safe. We're learning. That small shift from judgment to curiosity rewires your relationship with English. Try this today. Think of one mistake you made in English recently. Now describe it in one sentence, like a scientist. For example, I couldn't remember the word because I panicked. That's not weakness, that's awareness, and awareness is the beginning of control. Most learners never get here. They just blame themselves. You're going deeper, and once you learn to work with your nervous system, not against it, you'll notice something strange. Fluency doesn't feel like pressure anymore. It feels like possibility. Your brain isn't locked, it's listening. And it's waiting for you to treat it not like a machine, but like what it truly is, a living, learning, emotional part of you. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. He used to think he was afraid of English, but one night, sitting alone with an empty notebook, he realized something more honest. He wasn't afraid of the language, he was afraid of what it represented, because if he mastered English, then what? He'd have no more excuses. He'd have to apply for the job, leave the comfort zone, become the version of himself he secretly dreamed of. And that was terrifying. Most people never admit this, but sometimes we hold on to failure not because we like it, but because it protects us from change, from the pressure of becoming someone greater, from the weight of possibility. He stared at that notebook and whispered, "I'm not afraid of English. I'm afraid of growth." It felt like telling the truth for the first time in years. And then the grief came, not sadness, grief for the time he wasted, the versions of himself he abandoned, the job interviews he avoided, the messages he never replied to, the opportunities that came. And he quietly stepped back, saying, "I'm not ready." He wasn't mourning a language. He was mourning the life he kept postponing because of fear. But in that grief, he found something rare: clarity. He sat up straighter and wrote a sentence in English, not about his vocabulary, but about his identity. One sentence, one truth. "I am becoming someone I respect." That line didn't need perfect grammar. It needed courage. And with it, the next chapter began. The real transformation started when he stopped pretending. He stopped acting like he knew everything. He allowed himself to say, "I don't know this, but I will." Those words became a ritual, a prayer, a quiet rebellion against the perfectionism that had trapped him. Every time he forgot a word, instead of feeling shame, he said it again. "I don't know yet, but I will." Then came the rebirth. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. A new identity formed, not in a single day, but in the pattern of days. He began to describe his future self in English, just 2 sentences a day. "I am confident in my voice. I help people with my story." That's how it began, with words he could barely say, slowly becoming the man who says them naturally. And he realized the person he was becoming wasn't separate from the person who had failed. He was built from him. Each failure had left behind a tool, a lesson, a crack that let light in. He wasn't escaping his past, he was using it. And suddenly, English wasn't the goal. It was the mirror reflecting who he was becoming. And the more he spoke, the less afraid he became. Not because fear disappeared, but because it no longer ruled him. He saw English as the path, not the prison. And for the first time, he didn't feel like he was chasing someone else's dream. He felt like he was walking toward his own. The students who passed quickly never understood why he kept going. Why keep trying after failing 3 times? Why not give up and accept the label? What they didn't see was that his brain, under all that pressure, was quietly transforming. Failure wasn't destroying him. It was rebuilding him. Stronger, slower, deeper. In neuroscience, it's called deep learning, but to him, it just felt like pain with purpose. When you struggle, your brain doesn't shut down, it rewires. Every failure forces your neurons to adapt, to search, to remember. That's why students who always succeed easily often forget just as fast. But those who wrestle with every sentence, their memory runs deeper, their patterns are stronger. He didn't know this science then, but he felt it. Every stumble carved the path a little clearer. He discovered something else, something powerful. When he learned English through stories, not lists, his memory lit up like a city at night. It's called the narrative memory principle. Stories activate more regions of the brain than facts. Vocabulary inside a story sticks like glue. He stopped memorizing word lists. Instead, he read short, emotional stories, again and again. Now, when he hears regret, he remembers the character who whispered it. Mistakes for him became mirrors. Each wrong sentence showed him what to fix. Each correction made the pattern sharper. This is the error correction loop. The brain improves not through knowing, but through not knowing, then knowing. So when he repeated a phrase 3 times correctly, it wasn't just practice, it was transformation. I'm not good at English slowly became, I'm learning to express myself. But what made the knowledge permanent wasn't repetition alone. It was emotion. Emotion plus repetition. Permanent imprint. Think about it. You still remember moments from years ago, not because they were logical, but because they made you feel. That's why his breakthroughs didn't come from textbooks. They came from moments, from late nights reading aloud, from mornings when he almost gave up, but didn't. He started reviewing one difficult phrase a day, not because someone told him to, but because it became a ritual, like brushing his brain. He would say it slowly, then faster, then with emotion. The sentence didn't just live in his mouth, it lived in his identity. One phrase at a time, his brain rewired itself into something resilient. He didn't use fancy tools at first. No apps, no teachers, just a notebook and a question. What scared me in English today? Then he'd revisit it, practice it, shadow it, again and again. His confidence didn't come from talent. It came from facing the thing he feared until it became familiar. And now, ironically, the man who failed the most learned the deepest, and not just English. He learned how learning really works. With emotion, with story, with persistence, and above all, with the belief that even a slow learner can become unforgettable when the learning is honest. He didn't walk differently. He didn't raise his voice. But people noticed. There was something in his posture, quiet, grounded, unbothered. He no longer tried to hide behind books or busy himself with distractions. He stood still, looked people in the eyes, spoke slowly. Not because he rehearsed his words, but because he finally believed them. He wasn't proving anything anymore. He was just being. His English wasn't perfect, but his energy was clear. Students whispered, "He speaks differently now." Not louder, not faster, just clearer, more intentional. Every word had weight. And that's when they realized fluency isn't just language, it's presence. He didn't try to sound native, he just sounded real. And in a world of noise, real is powerful. The biggest change, he stopped editing himself while speaking. You know that mental filter, the one that says, wait, is this the right grammar? Is this good enough? He let it go. Now, when someone asked him a question, he answered directly, naturally, even if the sentence had a small mistake, because fluency isn't speaking perfectly, it's speaking honestly. And honesty builds trust. Students came to him not because he had all the answers, but because he listened. They said, I mess up when I speak. And he didn't give a lecture. He shared his own struggles. I used to freeze every time someone asked me where I was from. That simple honesty opened hearts. People trust those who survived their shame, not those who pretend they never had it. He told his students, practice doesn't just change your English, it changes your relationship with yourself. He gave them a daily task. Speak one sentence while standing tall, shoulders back, chin up. Not to impress, but to train your body to carry confidence, even before you feel it inside, because posture speaks before words ever do. When one student said, I'm not a teacher, he replied gently, you don't need to be a teacher to guide someone. Share one thing you've learned in English. That's mentorship. And they did. In WhatsApp groups, in small conversations, in voice messages. One by one, his students began mentoring others, not from perfection, but from experience. And that's when everything shifted. He was no longer just a man who improved his English. He became a symbol of persistence, a reminder that failure doesn't disqualify you from leading. It qualifies you. He didn't rise because he passed the test. He rose because he didn't quit when it broke him. And now people followed him, not because he had answers, but because he had walked the road. He became a mentor, not because he was fluent, but because he had earned something more valuable, self-trust. The kind of confidence that says, I may fall again, but I know how to rise. And in every sentence he spoke, that quiet strength echoed. He once sat alone in a quiet room, staring at another rejection email, another test, failed, another opportunity, gone. He whispered to himself, why did I fail so many times? The answer wasn't easy, but it came, slowly, honestly, because I was learning alone, scared, ashamed. Amada, that sentence didn't hurt. It healed. It gave shape to the invisible struggle he carried for years. He began to see clearly it wasn't his lack of talent that delayed him. It was the belief that he had to be perfect before he was allowed to try. He looked back at all the days he showed up anyway, tired, afraid, misunderstood, and asked, what actually changed my life? The answer was simple. He showed up. Even when the world said, you're not enough, he kept going. And then came the question that always defines the turning point. Who am I now? Not the scared boy who panicked during interviews, not the student who couldn't finish a sentence. He was someone who teaches, not from a podium of perfection, but from a place of truth. He had scars, yes, but now they were maps that showed others where not to give up. He stood in front of the mirror, looked himself in the eye, and said out loud, I learn without shame. He didn't mumble. He didn't apologize. He claimed it. That one sentence changed the way he approached everything, grammar, speaking, life, because shame had stolen enough time. He was done feeding it. That day, he set a challenge for himself, not a big one, just this. Speak English for 60 seconds without apologizing. No, sorry, my English is bad. No, this is probably wrong. Just speak. Messy, proud, alive. When he finished, something surprising happened. He didn't feel embarrassed. He felt free. Not perfect, but free. And in that freedom, something beautiful was born. A new belief, a new identity. One he had to say out loud to truly own. My story gives me strength. Not just the success, the failures, the late nights, the cracks, all of it. It wasn't the perfect grammar that made him a teacher. It was the truth behind his journey. Now, when people ask, what happens next? He doesn't give a 5-step plan. He says one thing, failure becomes your teacher, not your label. And then he gives his students a challenge, a small one. Record a 20-second story, any story, about a time you failed and what it taught you. In English, no pressure, no script, just truth, because the truth, spoken out loud, has the power to dissolve shame and turn fear into fuel. And if you're still breathing, still learning, still trying, then your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Let me ask you a question, not as a teacher, not as a coach, but as someone who understands the weight you carry. What if everything you called failure was just preparation? What if the shame you've been avoiding is the doorway to your next breakthrough? What if English isn't just a language you're learning, but the path to becoming who you were meant to be? This isn't just a story about a man who failed 3 times. It's a story about what happens when you stop running from your weakness and start using it as your weapon, because fluency isn't just about grammar or pronunciation. It's about identity. It's about standing in your story and speaking anyway. So now I turn it to you. What have you been avoiding because you're afraid of looking stupid in English? What version of yourself have you been postponing? And what would happen if today you spoke one honest sentence, even if it wasn't perfect? You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to begin. And if this story touched something in you, if it gave you hope, or reflection, or the courage to keep going, then don't let it disappear into the next video. Leave a comment right now. Tell us, what is your relationship with English, and what are you ready to change? Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and join this community of people who are not just learning English, they're rebuilding their lives, one word at a time.